Okay, we are getting started this afternoon. We're going to wait for a few people to join us. And while we are waiting, I'll show you some of the examples we've already made. There's going to be people joining us throughout the time. I just wanted to get started here and show you some examples we got started. This is a terrarium that I actually started a few years ago that needed a new plant. This one is an open air terrarium, so that one doesn't have a lid. My daughter Lulu put together this air plant and moss terrarium here with her little elephant friend, so that one also won't need to have a lid on it. This one's fun. This one's at least a year old. My son Jameson made it in school. It hasn't been opened at all. Water was put into it and it's been growing on its own independently since then. So it's been neat to kind of see how things grow and form. So that shows you just how long they can last. And then these are some demos that we just made before today, and they're going to be just like the ones we're making with you in a minute. This one here is made in an old spaghetti jar. And I have the lids off right now because as you lid them, it holds the moisture in, but it can also make them a little foggy. And so you'll have to wipe them out every once in a while. Here's another one that we just made we'll talk about. This one is a very, very small, narrow opening, and I'll show you some tools we have for that. And then this is another open air terrarium. And this one is specifically made, this one was kind of put together by me and my kids to have dried items in it. So this one doesn't need to get watered at all. So you can see that there's lots of different ways you can make a terrarium. And really the base that you need is a container. And so here, as we're getting ready to get started, here are some examples of some containers we can use. Some small jelly jars, baby food jars. We're going to be using this one for our demo. This is the spaghetti container. But you don't have to have containers with lids. You can, like I'm showing here, and here this was an old snack jar that we just opened up and put things inside of. This was an old vase. All of these can be used to make a terrarium. And you'll notice that I have some helpers today. My dog and my kids are here. This is Lulu and Jameson, and they are going to help us with making the terrarium today. So as we get started, we're going to look at the containers. The other things you'll need is some moss. I wanted to show this. Dried moss is available at arts and crafts stores. It is real moss that's been dried out and then dyed. If you're using a container that doesn't need to be watered or items that don't need to actually be planted, you can use this. We're also going to use it as a barrier between our rock level and our dirt level. We'll talk more about that in a second. Here are some decorative things that we pulled together to put into our terrarium. And here is some stuff that we gathered from the yard. We gathered some bits of moss, some lichen, a few ferns. When we pulled out the fern, we made sure to grab some dirt and the root ball that goes with it so that it can really grow and last. But we didn't spend any money on these materials. These are all things that we found in the home and around our house. We borrowed some rocks from our driveway. And then this is some topsoil that I had left over from a gardening project. Okay. Some other tools that you can use to help place things into the container, just some pens and sticks and dowels, as well as a funnel to help get the dirt into smaller containers. Okay, when you are filling a smaller container, this is an empty version of the one I showed you here that I already made. This one really required the use of a lot of patience and the tools that I showed you below to kind of help place everything. So we're going to get started. If you do have any questions, please let us know. Hey everybody, I'm Chris from the Hunter Art Museum, and we're going to build our own terrarium. So we're going to get started. If you do have any questions, feel free to send a message and I will do my best to answer them as we go. We're going to get started, and we are going to make a terrarium using this old spaghetti jar container. Okay, so we're going to get started here. Let me turn this around, and I'm going to have my assistant open it up. And the first thing we're going to do is put in a layer of rocks in the bottom. And the whole reason we do that is so that when you add water to your terrarium, the extra water has a place to go that won't cause molding or water damage to the roots of the plants that we are planting above. So you can see that in this finished one here. Sorry if it's a little blurry. That the rocks and the moss create a barrier from the dirt so that when you water it, the extra water goes down here, and then evaporation, condensation, and so on keeps happening over and over again. And your terrarium becomes self-contained. Okay, so the rocks are in the bottom. Fantastic, about an inch or so of rocks. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a layer of moss in the bottom. And this is where we can use that dried moss that I showed you before. It's sort of a decorative layer, but it's also functional in keeping the dirt away from the rocks that we are placing in there. Now, I will also let you know, yeah, you guys want to stuff it down in there? Stuff it good, tight. You do not need to have the rock and first moss layer at all. If you don't have it, that is fine. You can just have the dirt and the things in there. You'll just have to be a little bit more cautious and mindful of when you are watering that it doesn't get too wet. Just kind of keep an eye on your plants and things that are in there. Okay, so we're stuffing this down, and the reason why we want this to be kind of tight is that creates, it's really a visual thing. It's an aesthetic that you're keeping the dirt out of the rocks, and it adds a bit of color and interest to your piece. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have Jameson add some dirt to our layer of rocks and moss. Okay, I'll let him fill that up. There we go. And some of the dirt will get down into your rock layer, into your moss layer, and that is fine. It's all very loose, and really it'll work out fine either way. You don't necessarily need the funnel, but it does help keep it a little bit cleaner, especially if you're doing it inside. It also can help you kind of direct where the material is going a little bit better. So just to repeat, the rock layer is about an inch deep. The moss layer is optional and just has to be a layer to separate between the rock and the dirt, but is not necessary. And then the dirt, you want to have at least 1 to 2 inches. 2 inches is ideal. A little bit more is fine. Again, it's an aesthetic where you want to make sure you have enough dirt for the plants, but you also want to have enough room for those plants to grow. So we're going to kind of shake this down. Let's take a look here. Kind of tap it down a little bit. Okay. There we go. And let me lift this up so people can see it a little bit better. So here we have the rock layer, the moss, and the dirt. Sorry about the glare. There we go. Okay. So now, something I'm going to do that I found just from doing these a few times is I'm going to add a little bit of water now to the dirt. And this is just to get the dirt moist and wet and ready for the plants that'll be in it. You can see that the water goes down to the rock and moss layer, but it will continue to hydrate the dirt as well. Okay, so Jameson, I'm going to hand you the phone. Hold that right there. Hold it. Wait. We're not doing that yet. Well, first thing we're going to do is plant the plant that we want to be in there. So when you're choosing a plant, I chose a fern because ferns naturally grow in humid conditions and kind of fit this size of what we're doing. And I really just went up and into my backyard and looked for ferns that were already growing well and some small ones that maybe might not grow as big or as successfully, and thinned them out. I also had some house plants that I had rooted and separated as well. So it really depends on what type of container you're using and what kind of condition you think they'll be in. I did include some of the dirt and made sure to grab all of the roots. So before we do any of the decorating, I'm going to open up a spot here inside of the terrarium and drop in my fern and press that root ball down into the dirt. And then just to make sure, I'm going to put a little bit more dirt on top to make sure that all of the roots are covered and have, so that it's grounded in place. Okay, so now we can go about decorating. And this is where we have that big bowl of stuff. Now we get to choose the stuff.
Already.
Okay, how about, let's start with some moss to cover the ground. Here, I'll take this. Thank you.
Something already.
Great. Why don't we put some moss in first? Jamison, you want to put that moss in? Okay, press that down. We're going to cover the ground first. There you go. Good. Excellent. Let's see. Let's make sure the ground is covered. Grab a little bit more moss here. Put it on the other side of the fern. Lula, did you say you had something you wanted to add? Sorry about that, guys. Got a little blurry. Oh, it's hard to see.
Can I put it in?
Yeah, why don't you put it in?
Oopsies, I'll grab that. Oops.
Yeah, why don't you put that in?
Sorry, Jameson.
Found it.
It was so good.
Here you go.
And this is also where you can use your pens and tiny fingers. Lula, do you want to pick out a character to live in our little fern forest?
Jameson, do you want help?
Sure.
You can see how things are starting to come together here.
Maybe here.
Alright. We're going to stick our little figure down in here. And a little goat. There we go. And then to kind of finish it off, we're just going to tuck in our plant. And it's all done. We're all set. Oops, things kind of got a little wobbly here. We'll have to go back in and move things around. And I apologize, the glare on the glass makes it hard to see. But what's fun about this project is you can kind of change it up and go back in and adjust things. It is really fun to do with the whole family. And you can use lots of materials that you have at home and make it really fun. And then to take care of your terrarium, this is one that will be lidded. So we'll put a lid on top of it to help keep in the humidity. Oops, sorry, it keeps going out of focus. And that will help hold the humidity in so that you only have to take care of it maybe every couple of weeks. You can add a little bit of water or sprinkle some water into it. For the ones that are wide open, like this one, I'll probably water it as often as I water my house plants. So once a week, add some water directly to this plant and sprinkle extra water on top of the moss. Whereas the air plant one will take care of it the way we would take care of the air plant, take the air plant out and soak it and so on. So how you care for your your terrarium will depend on what's kind of living in there. This is one like we just made with the little Buddha inside and the fern and the moss. And this one, because it is sealed, we'll just add water to it, probably enough water to fill up where the rocks are here at the bottom. And then from there, close it, and it may not need really to be taking too much else happen to it. We can just let it exist on its own. And every once in a while, if it gets, cloudy and humid or messy, you can just take a regular paper towel and go in there and wipe it out. Don't use any cleaners on your terrarium on the inside. So yes, here's the one we finished. So that'll also get lidded and go and hang out. One other thing to remember with your terrariums, don't leave them in direct light. It is like a greenhouse in the sense of the light coming in through the glass and amplifying and that can be damaging to the plants. So put it on a window that doesn't get direct light, or on a table that does get light but not a direct sunshine into it. I had one other one I was going to make here just to kind of show a tiny one. So in this case, this is such a tiny little container. I don't have enough room for all the different layers that I mentioned. So I'm really just going to put in this little bit of dirt, as well as a splash of the water to give it moisture, okay, to make the dirt moist. There we go. And then I have, in there, I was just going to put a little chunk of decorative moss. So this little moss here, I've got a little mini fern.
Perfect.
Here we go.
Put a fish in it.
Oh, kids want the fish. I'm going to put a fish in there. And here's this really cool, I found this cool little mushroom guy. So I'm going to stick that in there and put the kids' little fish in there.
Yay.
And so now that one, we'll put the lid on there and it will exist on its own as well. So lots of different ways you can make terrariums, and there's a lot of learning as you go, and as they kind of exist over time, you'll see which plants work better or don't. Again, everything we're making our terrariums with today are things that we found in the house or outside in our yard. So have fun and experiment. Learn about the plants that are in your yard. Find out which ones like humid, warm spaces and which ones don't. And don't be afraid to experiment and have some fun making these. We had so much fun. We made all of these today so far. We've been on a roll, and we're looking forward to giving some to friends and neighbors as we are having fun making these creative things today. So thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to ask any questions in the comments even later, and I can come back and answer them. I'd be happy to help, and I look forward to seeing your terrarium creations. Please, if you do make them, post them on social media and tag the hunter so that we can see your awesome creations. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.